Hey, what's going on there, guys? Nick here from AbsoluteMTG, and welcome back to another deck tech here on the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Standard Jeskai Black for the Battle for Zendikar season of Standard. So I was actually able to attend a preliminary Pro Tour qualifier at our local shop, and I was able to pilot this list to a first place finish, which was so awesome because I get another chance to play in the regional Pro Tour qualifiers, and I get yet another chance to play for the Pro Tour here. So I'm pretty excited about that, but I'm also excited to share this list with you guys because I actually really liked playing this throughout all the rounds that I played. So one interesting thing before we actually get to taking a look at the cards is that this list is not playing Dragonlord Ojutai, and that was just a meta decision based on me feeling that a lot of players would be playing Crackling Doom. So that's the reason why you don't see it, because Dragonlord Ojutai is kind of weak to Crackling Doom. But otherwise, this deck is just insane. I decided to just go for more of a tempo-based Jeskai deck and just kind of commit threats to the board and then have backup cards like Crackling Doom for the Esper players and whatnot, and just otherwise to get rid of big threats. But also having some low CMC stuff like Wild Slash and Fiery Impulse, as well as Valorous Stance as well, to deal with a variety of different things in the format right now. So to start things off with our creatures, we have 3 Hangerback Walkers. So I really love Hangerback Walker. It was insane every single time I played it, except for whenever it would get complete disregarded. So that's the only time that it was a little bit awkward having to play through control and them having their resource of just exiling it so I don't get the tokens. But otherwise, Hangerback Walker is just insane. You get to make it super big. Things to remember are against decks that could be playing complete disregard, you want to make it bigger than 3. And against players that are playing Abzan Charm, you want to make it smaller than 3 because you don't want your opponent to be able to just Abzan Charm it away. So there's a little bit of etiquette in how you play against different matchups with Hangerback Walker, but with some practice, you pretty much figure it out very quick. We also have 2 Dragon Master Outcasts. So this card is amazing in any of the drawn-out matches where your opponent's not just playing super aggressive. You can just kind of sit back on the board. You can commit it to the board with 6 lands in play, and then every upkeep you get a 5/5. We have 2 Abbot of Carol Keep, so this card is great whenever you're just trying to hit lands in the early game. You never really play this card on turn 2. It's also just kind of like a mid to late game play, but on turn 3, I've cast my fair share of Abbots to just try to hit a land off the top. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But ultimately, it's a great turn 3 play, or otherwise, mid to late game, if you draw it and you top deck it, you're able to just get another top deck off the top and potentially play another spell, or just hit a land drop off the top and conceal a little bit of information from your opponent if you have a land that you were going to play from your hand anyway. We have 3 Soulfire Grandmaster, so this card is great. I didn't really have an opportunity to cast a whole lot of stuff with the buyback on it. However, being able to buy back spells like Wild Slash and Fiery Impulse is just great. But the Soulfire Grandmaster is great against other aggressive decks because it has lifelink, and it also gives lifelink to your spells as well. So you can play back and forth there with gaining back some life against the more aggressive decks in the format. But it's just another 2-drop that we want on curve that we can just keep on hitting our opponent. The definite MVP in this deck is Jace Vern's Prodigies. So this card allows you to buy back, or I guess otherwise flashback, like Snapcaster Flashback, your important spells in the deck, whether it's like Crackling Doom, a Wild Slash to get rid of a small guy, or even after you've sideboarded, getting another Transgress to mind, or a complete disregard against your opponent is just great whenever it's flipped. But otherwise, just on its front face side for Jace, being able to loot is great whenever you need certain things, like maybe you don't have as many land drops as you actually would have hoped for. Getting a looter effect in there also just helps you kind of filter out the cards that you don't need for certain matchups if you're playing a game 1, and ultimately just kind of accelerates you into the spots where you would actually like to be. And we have the 4 Mantis Riders, which is just the best tempo card that Jeskai has. Playing it on turn 3 and just bashing it for 3 every single turn while also having a blocker is just incredibly insane in this type of a deck. We're also playing 3 Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. I really wanted to jam a 4th one in here, but I really couldn't fit it, especially because I wanted to play like a lot of small cards like Wild Slash, Fiery Impulse, and Valorous Stance. But the Gideon is just amazing. There was one game where I actually got to ultimate 3 different Gideons because the game was just so super drawn out. But Gideon's amazing because it allows you to commit to the board a bunch of small dudes every single turn. Just gives you a 2/2 every turn, and against decks that are playing like Languish, Crux of Fate, and Hostilities, even if they wipe your board, you still have that threat on the table that's going to keep on putting more stuff out, and they can't counter it because it's already on the table, so they have to use something like Ruinous Path or Utter End, which could tap them out for the turn and allow you to actually play more cards and resolve cards that you actually wanted not to be countered. Now for the spells of the deck, we're playing 2 Wild Slash to be able to deal with some of the small stuff that our opponent's playing. It's mainly just kind of a countermeasure in Game 1 that you have for aggressive decks. You keep it in for Game 2 and Game 3 against like aggro decks, red deck wins, like a Tarka Red, stuff like that. We have 1 Fiery Impulse, which is basically in there for the same reason, but the Fiery Impulse can actually hit things like Mantis Rider if we're able to hit the Spell Mastery off of it, and it can even hit like a Shambling Event if your opponent animates it and you have Spell Mastery off of it as well. We have 2 Valorous Stance, which is more so for getting rid of cards like Anafenza and Siege Rhino than it is to protect our cards, but sometimes it is relevant if our opponent's using like a burn spell to get rid of something that we have. We can Valorous Stance and we can protect it for the turn. There was actually also an instance where I was playing against the mirror match and I had a big Hangerback Walker. My opponent had a bunch of flyers and I used the Valorous Stance to kill my own Hangerback Walker to produce a bunch of 2/2s because I had a Gideon emblem out. But produce a bunch of 2/2 flyers that could just block for the following turns. So there are some cool instances and plays that you can make with the Valorous Stance that allow you to just kind of get over your opponent because you killed your own dude, and in this case, like Hangerback Walker. We have the 4 Crackling Dooms, which is just like one of my favorite cards in this deck, if not just the best card in this deck, I think. Crackling Doom is just insane. I want to be playing Crackling Doom at the beginning of this format right now. It deals with a whole lot of problems, especially like Esper and your opponent playing Silumgar and Ojutai, so we want to have a card that just deals with a threat super easy and also deals some damage to our opponent. We have 3 Ojutai's Command, which is really insane whenever you think about it, being able to get back like a Dragon Master Outcast, an Abbot to get a free exile off the top so you can play something, or even just getting a Jace Vern's Prodigy back onto the table. All of this can be done at instant speed, so at the end of your opponent's turn, you can go for Ojutai's Command, you can choose to like draw a card or gain 4 life and bring a creature back onto the field, which is great in the case of it being like Outcast or Jace. But otherwise, if your opponent is just tapping themselves out to play a big creature like a Dragon Lord for the turn, then you can counter it and also bring a dude back and then go from there with trying to just outvalue your opponent. The Ojutai's Command has just been really, really awesome thus far. And then we have 2 Dig Through Time. So the Dig Through Time is just the cream of the crop here because we're just playing so much stuff that's going to hit our grave. We have a bunch of fetch lands that we're playing that are going to interact with making our Jace flip. We're just going to fuel our graveyard. So the Dig Through Time is great because at instant speed at the end of our opponent's turn, we can just fuel our hand, or even during our turn, if our opponent is like tapped out for their turn, we can cast a Dig Through Time, assured that it actually resolves, find the pieces that we want, add them to our hand, and then go from there with trying to just out-tempo and just outvalue our opponent. So for the sideboard here, there are a lot of different things that I've chosen to actually incorporate for a sideboard strategy. First and foremost, we have the Complete Disregard. So we're playing 2 copies of it, and the Complete Disregard is insane whenever you're playing against cards like Hangerback Walker and Deathmist Raptor. That's the big reason why you want to have them, and you want to assure yourself that those cards are exiled and neither of them actually hit the graveyard and have any shenanigans with making tokens or recurring them or anything like that. But otherwise, the Complete Disregard is just an easy removal spell whenever you're playing up against other aggro decks as well. We have 1 Disdainful Stroke for any of the decks that are just playing an abundance of 4 CMC or greater cards. We have a Exert Influence, which is almost exclusively for decks that are playing things like Anafenza and also like Siege Rhino. So those type of decks, the Exert Influence is just awesome. You get to take one of their dudes, and usually there's a huge tempo swing from it, especially if you're on the play and on your opponent's turn 4, they play Siege Rhino. On your turn 5, you hit your land drop, and you're able to influence and actually take their Rhino that they just tapped out to play. We have 1 Dispel, which is good in a lot of different matchups, but the most useful and impactful one to have it in for is for any of the control decks, just being able to counter one of your opponent's counter spells whenever you're going to cast something assures you that you're actually able to resolve your card, and otherwise it can counter things like a complete disregard or an utter end that would come down and get rid of one of your cards otherwise. We also have Horribly Awry, which is, again, for things like Deathmist Raptor that we want to actually exile and we don't want our opponent to actually have, but otherwise for other value decks that are playing things like Anafenza, Siege Rhino again, we want to have the Horribly Awry just to counter off their threat like that and just assure ourselves that our opponent just kind of wasted a turn of trying to do something. And we have one Negate here to finish off our counter spells in the sideboard. So the Negate is just kind of a well-rounded card. If your opponent's playing just a bunch of non-creature spells, a bunch of Planeswalkers, and a bunch of cards like Languish and Hostilities or Crux of Fate, things of that nature, the Negate is just awesome just because you get to depower whatever types of cards your opponent's playing, and you can potentially just put yourself in a massive tempo swing, especially if your opponent taps out for something like a sweeper. We have the 2 Transgress the Mind, which I chose to play over Duress, just because the Transgress actually will allow you to get rid of cards like Dragon Lord Ojutai and Silumgar, the Drifting Death as well. The Transgress the Mind is just insane for practical implications like that, where you just get to get rid of one of your opponent's actual win conditions. The fact that it exiles is also a little bit relevant for cards like Haven of the Spirit Dragon. But otherwise, the Transgress just hits a lot of different things. There's a lot of decks that are playing 3 CMC and up cards, so the Transgress just ends up being pretty useful in a variety of different implications. We have 2 Radiant Flames for any time that we see a matchup where our opponent's playing a bunch of X2 or even X3 creatures as well, if your opponent's playing anything like tokens or is just playing a basic red aggro strategy. The Radiant Flames is awesome, especially if we have Soulfire Grandmaster out, giving our spell a instance of lifelink where it's going to be dealing damage to all of our opponent's creatures and also our creatures as well. The other thing that's awesome about the Radiant Flames is it is tri-modal, I guess, if you want to say, because we can tap like red, red, red for it to use the Radiant Flames for 1 and get rid of all of our opponent's X1s. We can also do it for a X value of 2 if we want to go for that, tapping red, red, and then like white or blue or whatever to keep one of our Mantis Riders alive. Or if we just don't care, we can go like red, blue, white, or red, blue, black, or any combination of our 4 colors that we're playing in the deck here, and we can just get rid of all X3s on the board. Basically, what I'm saying is it's a great, almost Anger of the Gods that we have that is tri-modal, which sometimes ends up being relevant. We have 1 Roast, which is just kind of mindless removal for non-flying creatures that we might encounter, and if our opponent's just playing like a creature-based deck or just value creatures. And last but not least, we have 3 Surge of Righteousness in the board, which is basically just a meta choice because Atarka Red is just running around very rampant right now. It's just better than Erishin Cleric right now because the Atarka Red deck doesn't care whether you gain 3 life or not because they're just going to deal a massive, massive amount of damage in 1 turn, and usually that 3 life doesn't matter whatsoever, especially because they're going to be trampling over. But the Surge is also good because it'll hit black creatures like Anafenza and Siege Rhino, which I know I keep on bringing them up, but they are important cards in the format right now, and they are things that you want to get around. So the Surge can allow you to get through those cards as well. But mainly the Surge is just better than Erishin Cleric, and the reason why you want to have it is so that you can side it in against the Atarka Red matchup. If they get trigger happy and they fire off and just want to deal as much damage as possible and you have the mana open, you can punish them with Surge and also gain some life back off of it as well, and you can just pretty much murder their game plan because they usually got like at least 2 for 1, if not 3 for 1 off of the Surge. So that is all you guys need to know about standard Jeskai Black. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would greatly appreciate it if you thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel for more Magic the Gathering content. But until next time, guys, thank you for watching, and peace out.